In dirt late model racing, the chassis are always a very big deal, and it's something the race fans always want to talk about. The battles between Longhorn and Rocket and all of the other chassis manufacturers, who's running what, who's winning. And we know in 2022, Longhorn Chassis did very well, a lot of big money, especially with Jonathan Davenport at the wheel. And so far in 2023, Longhorn has won every major super late model race to start the season. And at the center of Longhorn Chassis and a very important figure in all of this is Kevin Rumley. Kevin kind of works in this area between Bilstein shocks and Longhorn Chassis. And on top of that, he's got his own race car with Kyle Larson at the wheel. Kevin joins me on this episode to talk all sorts of things dirt late model racing. We talk the droop rule. We talk about Kyle as a driver. We talk how they got together. We talk about Kevin's background. A lot of good information here in the next 35 minutes here with Kevin Rumley. So if you're a dirt late model fan, definitely check this one out. Enjoy the episode. Kevin, I want to start with the last couple of weeks. You've had two incidents with your driver where he crashed the car. Are you going to fire the guy? Have you had to have a conversation with him about hurting your race cars? What has your conversations been here with Kyle lately about the last couple of race nights?
No, Kyle's perfect. He's the best, so he knows when he makes mistakes, and you don't have to say anything. But we're all in this together, so whatever he chooses to do, whether it be a mistake or not, we're behind him 100%. So,
have you ever had that happen before, where a driver won a race and then immediately crashed the race car?
Jonathan Davenport in 2009, I believe it was March Madness at Cherokee Speedway. First race he ever drove for K&L Rumley Enterprises. He crashed the car right after the race. Almost went over the wall at Cherokee Speedway. So yes, we've had that happen before.
How much damage was actually done to the car after Larson did that? Did you have quite a bit of work to do?
It was mainly just cosmetic, so it wasn't that bad for sure.
Okay, good. Tell me about I know it's been a busy kind of last few days. You came back from Bubba, and then you had to kind of go back down there. But what is happening with your race car right now? I know you had to go to Longhorn after the incident at Bubba. Was there more damage than you thought there was after that deal the other night?
No, I mean it's just standard procedure for a team of our level, just to put it back on the jag, confirm everything is all the pickup points are right. We're fortunate enough to have time and resources to do that, so we definitely take advantage of it.
So right now, I know you're kind of back and forth. What does the last couple of weeks look like in terms of your schedule, and what do the next couple of weeks look like? I know, you guys are racing a little bit too, but you obviously have your normal kind of job responsibilities with Bilstein and working with Longhorn. So are you going to be back and forth more? Or are you going back down, to Florida after we talk here? What is your schedule like right now?
Yes, sir. I'll go back down for Volusia and handle some work requirements and try to help Longhorn customers and Bilstein customers, and definitely earn my keep as far as that's regards. So, and we might even take the race car back down.
So there is a possibility that we could see you guys back down there with the race car again.
Yeah, there's a possibility for sure.
All right, good. Tell me, just I know me and you have actually talked before. You were like one of my very first interviews a couple of years ago. But talk me through your role right now, kind of between Bilstein and Longhorn, and where exactly you kind of fit in this kind of melding of the two companies and really the race teams that you work with.
Yeah, so I'm in a very good, unique situation where I'm a consultant engineer for Bilstein shock absorbers and a consultant engineer for Longhorn Chassis. It just so happens they're strategic partners in the marketplace, and it's a good pairing. Of course, I'm here to support all Longhorn drivers, and I'm here to support all Bilstein customers, and it works very well. I'm very ethical with everything I do work-wise. There hasn't been any conflicts or anything. So it's good for everybody. I learned a lot. I'm very happy to be in this situation. I'm very excited moving forward.
Give me just like the quick rundown on your background. Those of us that pay attention to dirt late model racing know that you've been around basically your whole life, but what has your education been, and how have you kind of, built yourself to the point you are now? Is it engineering? Is it like just being around the race car? Like what is, just give me the short version of the Kevin Rumley background.
Well, I was born in 1977. My dad was a regional car owner, very successful regional car owner. I was in the grandstands when I was 4 months old, my very first race. Pretty much every weekend during summer, I've been at a racetrack. Um, when I got out of school, ever since I was in school, all I could think about doing was working on the race car. Um, and pretty much my whole life was revolved around that. Went to UNC Charlotte Engineering to become a better racer. Um, and and the tools I've learned have been instrumental in the success that we've had.
The kind of history of Longhorn Chassis, started by Bobby and Terry Labonte, I believe. And then, here recently it's kind of transitioned into, a new ownership group with, kind of Steve Arpin. From where you sit, have there been changes? Is it like drastically different from one ownership group to the next with Longhorn? Like what are the differences or maybe the similarities you see kind of between the two versions now that we've had?
Yeah, well, it's not having the piece that Steve Arpin brings to the equation was very difficult for the Labontes. They needed a managing partner that has the resources and the skills that Steve brings. So it's been the final piece of the puzzle was added, and I truly believe that. And the amount of progress, business side efficiencies has been incredible since March. So, like I said, I'm very excited to be associated with a company that's rapidly improving and moving forward. And I think the sky's the limit.
What are those things that Steve brings to the table? I would assume Steve's not like a super technical guy, right?
No, so he brings the business sense. He has the energy and time uh, to add to customer service and the infrastructure efficiency of Longhorn. Um, and I mean, it only took like a few small changes to make a huge improvement.
Like if those of us that are watching dirt late model racing, we know that it seems to be right now that Longhorn is, like basically dominating super late model racing right now. That you look around and most of the major super late model races this year have been won by Longhorn Chassis, and a lot of big time late model races last year were won by Longhorn Chassis. uh how much of that is, like, I know you're not going to like answer like super technical questions about this, obviously, because a lot of those things are trade secrets. But I guess I'm curious why that's the case, why you think that's the case. Like, what can you share with us about what Longhorn has right now, and maybe the combination of Longhorn and Bilstein? And I know not all Longhorn teams are on those shocks, but from where you sit, can you give us like maybe a little bit of a pulled back version of what you guys are doing so well right now?
Yeah, I mean, at Longhorn Chassis, the drivers and the teams are our greatest assets. So if we can deliver a consistent product that gains their trust enough that they want to use it, that's our biggest asset and the road to be great. So Longhorn strives to have a consistent product where every chassis is the same within a certain reason. Then you could start developing baseline setups, so forth, to move forward and to be successful. And we're always looking to get better. That's why I'm in a very good situation to have an R&D team with Kyle Larson driving, and that's the best place to learn how to go faster is at the racetrack in competition.
How much collaboration is there between all of the teams? If you talk about Davenport and Landers and McCready, and obviously you guys with Kyle, how much collaboration is there? And I mean, are there things you guys are, keeping maybe closer to the vest, or is it pretty much an open notebook across kind of the Longhorn family?
I mean, it's a huge open notebook. So if we validate a setup in a package, that's pretty much open to all the customers, and we talk a lot. Now, of course, people like Davenport and Overton, Moran and Ricky Thornton Jr. They all do this for a living, so we're very respectful of the things that they do, that they want to hold close to their chest. But uh, if anyone starts to struggle a little bit, everyone's there to help. So it's a very good team. And I mean, we'll be at a test. You'll have drivers getting in and out of cars and filling what others are filling. And Tim McCready is good at helping all the customers, and he's a model house car driver.
How often are like version updates happening to a dirt late model chassis? Like, is it you have your kind of base package and then you're changing, maybe more suspension pieces, or are there actual changes happening regular to the chassis itself?
Well, in the beginning, there was a lot of change. And then as there's a lot of low hanging fruit, or there was, and any improvement that you do, it gets exponentially difficult to improve the product again. So we're constantly building R&D stuff, changing stuff, and about 10% of it works good enough where we can implement it to the product. And it's a pretty vast it's it's pretty vast road to get it implemented. So I don't know how Steve is going to do it in the future, but we had a 2023 update that has been very good, and they're small updates. I mean, all of our suspension components, we want the customers to be able to use all their spares, and be able to bolt all the bolt-on stuff up, so we don't add a cost to their race team for no reason.
The rules packages, it seems like around dirt late model racing have been, a big topic of discussion, and you hear all the time about the tire situation. You hear about the bodies. The droop rule has been a big topic of conversation as well. How do you, like as those rules change from year to year, how do you kind of change the cars and make sure that you're staying, fast within that rule book? Like, are you guys all putting your heads together and saying, okay, this is how the tire is going to change. Now we need to do X, Y, and Z. Like, what is that process like for when a rule is changed, or tweaks are made for you guys to then be able to absorb that, between Bilstein and Longhorn?
Yeah. So if the hardest part about racing and engineering and going fast is knowing why you're going fast, or knowing what you did to get you to this level. So as long as you know that, if there's any rules implemented, you can get there a different way. So rules are good for big organizations. Like any rule change is good for us, in my opinion, because we have the resources and we know how we ended up on this path, so we can get there anyway. And the sanctioning bodies have been very, very good at working with us. Like for Bilstein, for example, they don't want to take anything away from us that we can sell or generate a sell. And on the chassis side, the sanctioning bodies have been very good about not obsoleting all the customers' bodies, or obsoleting this part that'll cost the teams a lot of money to replace. So everybody kind of works together, and we realize that we have to stay in the box. So everything's been great. The sanctioning bodies have been very good to work with.
And I guess that's a good jumping off point too. I've only really kind of been paying attention to dirt late model racing for maybe 8 or 9 years. Has there been a point like there is right now where it's like it seems like there's a lot of cooperation right now between all of the various sanctioning bodies and series about rules? Has there been a point like this before, or is this as good as it's been?
I can remember when I was a kid, Richie Lewis with the Habitama series. Everyone got together and did a unified rule package for dirt late models, and it was when the industry really started to grow with some TV. And I kind of see that parallel now with the streaming services like Flow and some others. It Our sport seems to be growing at a rapid pace. So I think everyone's smart enough to get together and make sure we deliver the best product possible, with the most economical means for the teams.
I want to ask you specifically about the droop rule, just from from our as a fan, what do we either like what do we not understand about that drooper? I feel like we see a ton of criticism of it. It's not happening correctly. It's causing problems for teams and guys. But like as fans, like what do you on the more technical side want kind of the race fans to understand about the droop rule, how it works, how it's enforced, things like that?
Well, with the droop rule, some compliance has been taken away from the left rear suspension, which causes a little bit of less of traction. Probably about 200 pounds of downforce has been taken away as well. Um, so there's been some criticism that it's made the cars really hard to drive in traffic and so forth. But we did some tests at Charlotte with some downforce packages, and everything is kind of inconclusive at this point. I think the racing's been great this year. I think getting back to your previous question on the tires, I think that is definitely a positive move in the right direction. Now with we have 4 compounds, um, and it's open to choose. So you have comers and goers in the features, which makes very exciting racing, in my opinion.
Do you think that we've seen some guys lose positions and been DQ'd from races for failing the droop rule at certain times, and Overton, it's happened to him, it's happened to some other guys. Is that a situation where, like, and I've heard that the droop rule kind of puts you like in a little bit of a box with the way your kind of setups are, and when that happens, I obviously am not going to assume that everybody is trying to cheat the rule or anything like that, but is the way it's being measured, is it problematic for the teams? Does it really put you in a box for the way you're allowed to set up the race car, and is it easy to maybe get to a point where you're going to fail at some point?
Well, I think the droop rule when it came into Lucas last year and across the board, there was some revisions that added a level of complexity that I think caused all those disqualifications. This year, the droop rule has been tweaked to make it easier for the teams, and the penalties not so severe. Last year, like your right rear had to come off the ground at the same time. So if your right front suspension was at different heights, it really affected the tolerance of how the droop rule was measured. So, I mean, this year, I mean, it depends on how greedy the teams want to get. We try to go, the rule is 50 inches with a 1 inch tolerance. So we try to always stay at 50 inches so we can use that tolerance.
Bodies was something that I had talked to you about before, and I know they remain, a very important part of what you guys do. How much, R&D time are you putting in still to bodies? Are you to a point where you're happy with what you get, or is it kind of a constant battle still trying to find more counts of downforce here and there?
Yeah, well, definitely downforce and side force is extremely important. But we mainly focus on mechanical grip, and anything we get aero wise is just a bonus.
Interesting. I feel like the the fans and the things that you see with the twisted bodies, it would seem like that the bodies would be even more of a focus, but I guess that makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about your situation with Kyle Larson, and as much as I know, I feel like I don't know the backstory of how you and Kyle got hooked up. So can you tell me that story of how Kyle ends up in your car?
Well, it was basically a mutual friend that of Kyle that visited Longhorn during the early parts of the coronavirus situation in 2020, and we were building an R&D car. And McCready was scheduled to drive that car, but he acquired a great ride that year, so really didn't need to use any of our resources um, for competition. So it was just casual conversation. Well, hey, why don't we put Kyle in this R&D car? He wants to drive a late model. We can go test and we can use some resources. And um, yeah, it's been a great ride ever since then.
How does Kyle compare to McCready, to Davenport, driving styles, feedback? Is he very similar to those guys? Is he very different to those guys?
He's more of like a Davenport. He's momentum. He drives a car straight, where McCready has a lot of raw talent. Hits the traction strips, squirts off the bottom, and using those techniques that he learned in Northern Modifieds. But Kyle is similar to Davenport with a little bit of McCready mixed in. Like Kyle knows where the traction strips are and where the crumbs are, and it's been around dirt tracks his whole life and is very technical. So it's very interesting working with all these great drivers for sure.
Tell me if this is true or not. I feel like watching Kyle, you know, and it's true in a sprint car. It seems true in a late model that Kyle makes actually quite a few mistakes, but for whatever reason, his talent is able to overcome the mistakes that he made. Is that actually true from where you sit?
Kyle has a very high IQ, so when he makes a mistake, he immediately learns from it. So those mistakes, he is a learning curve that makes him be great, in my opinion.
As like him coming over to the late model side of things, are you like and I've heard this about Kyle before, that he's just like he's just going to give you feedback on what he feels, and I'm wondering if you try to educate him about what's actually happening with the race car, or if that doesn't matter to you as the setup guy. You're just curious about what he says about the race car and then how you can fix that. Like, is that true, or are you actually trying to teach him kind of technical aspects of the race car?
Not really. I mean, for me, having a driver like Kyle, it's like when we go to the racetrack, if we're slow, it's never the driver's fault. It's the car's fault. So we're constantly trying to get the car better. And for me, I'm constantly trying to design and build the setups around the driver's style. So I think Kyle, he talks to Overton a lot. He talks to McCready some. He obviously talks to Davenport, and he gets some pointers. And he does a lot of soul searching too. Like he he finally feels like a late model guy. He says this year. So that's very good.
How do you guys decide what your schedule is? Do you just try to keep open weekends, and if Kyle calls, you guys will be ready to go, or do you actually have like a set out schedule for the year?
Yeah, we have a schedule, but it's very fluent, and we want to keep this fun. We do it for fun, and anything we learn and anything it does for the businesses I work for is a bonus. Um, so keeping it fun is, hey, let's go here this weekend, or hey, let's race tomorrow night. Like the Bubba's Raceway Park decision was probably after midnight on Sunday, and that was very interesting. So it keeps it fun and exciting.
Do you like this version of racing like this, where you get to kind of pick and choose? You know, I know you've done national tours in the past. Is that something you'd like to get back to, or do you kind of like this version of just
You
like, hey,
know,
we're going to go race when we want to?
yeah, I like this version, and for me, it allows me to have a little bit of a life outside of racing as well. And home becomes more important the older you get. So yeah, I love, and but I love racing too. So being able to race at Vado for 6 nights straight was incredible. Then getting the car ready to get back to Golden Isles was very gratifying. So really enjoying what we have going on. So we'll keep on keeping on.
Where do you see like dirt late model racing going in terms of tech? Like, do you think, you know, right now the package is good and we should just kind of keep on with what we've got going right now? Do you see there being a lot more advancement in the technology and you know, more investments being made that way? Like, what are your thoughts about kind of the future of late model tech?
I think we'll keep refining and refining packages, and I think the cars could go faster. But as far as technological achievements that you can see on the stopwatch, we've gotten a lot of those in the past. So I think you'll see it heading down a path where setups are refined and packages are refined, and the end user learns how to adjust the car for track conditions. Um, I mean, that's a half a second getting your balance right at different tracks. So I think you'll see the end users getting more educated in their packages and being able to tune their cars where they're consistent from track to track. But yeah, I only really see refinements. Um, I mean, technological leapfrogs, I think, have been squished a little bit with some suspension rules. Um, yeah, which is less exciting for me, but it's equally exciting, just in a different way.
I've heard rumors of you showing up at some NASCAR shops from time to time, and I know that like, Bristol has been, a focus for a lot of teams. Can you confirm or deny whether or not you've consulted for some NASCAR teams along the way here?
Yeah, well, I mean, my previous life as a full time employment was for Exodyne Technologies, which made all the titanium valves, fuel pumps, and cam drives for all of motorsports. And I worked very closely with all the Cup engine departments and some chassis um, departments. So when I get hooked back up with Kyle Larson and all the NASCAR people seem to be dirt fans. So yeah, from time to time, I know a lot of people can reconnect with a lot of people and meet new people. And um, Kyle's Cup team has been very good to us, and they're nice to be around. So
I'm curious about the like, and we know this goes on in Formula One. We know it goes on in NASCAR. How much like espionage, people with long lenses happens in dirt late model racing, people taking peeks at what you got going on. It seems like things in dirt late model racing are very secretive with, car covers and all of that type of stuff. But like, are those things you notice? I feel like right now you're kind of like the Pied Piper and everybody wants to know what you have going on. But do you notice like that happening around the cars you're involved in?
yeah, there's a lot of that, especially in 2020 when we built this first R&D car. I mean, there was teams that you wouldn't think would be under it taking pictures. There was drivers you wouldn't think would be under it taking pictures, and um, it, I mean, to me, it's comical because if you get someone trying to copy you, you're always going to be ahead of them. So that's our stance on the situation.
Do you actually like maybe feel like a little bit of like, validation or like it's like, people respect what you're doing when that kind of thing happens?
Yeah, it's extremely gratifying for me for some of your peers to kind of give you props or being interested in what you're doing. Yeah, it kind of excites me for sure.
I'm curious what, I know you and your dad were super tight with the race team, and I'm curious what you think your dad would have to say about the situation with Kyle right now and the winning you guys have been able to do and kind of just being able to show up anywhere, be competitive.
Yeah, well, it's kind of cool. My dad, he was very ill at the time we were putting this deal together with Kyle, but he was able to go. His last time at the racetrack was Kyle's last test, and he got to see Kyle from the moment he got in the car, the first laps, and I think he kind of knew what was going to happen. So
I love it. I want to ask about kind of the future, the rest of the season for you, at least the next couple of weeks. What are things you're going to focus on for the rest of the season? What are things you're going to focus on through speed weeks? Are there certain things you're trying to help your teams with? Are there certain things you're trying to help Kyle with? What do you kind of foresee for yourself here for the next couple of weeks, next couple of months?
we'll definitely. So for me, racing this much early in the season, you'll learn a lot of things, and we're fortunate we have a break after speed weeks. So we're going to continue to refine the shock packages, come up with different valvings, different configurations of shocks that I think could be an advantage to our customers. Car wise, we have some projects, some very big projects at Longhorn that's going to be very interesting. That's going to take up a lot of time, and we'll probably build another R&D car soon. So that's very exciting for myself.
I want to ask about shocks specifically. It seems like all around dirt racing, shocks have become very, very important last 10, 15 years. For those of us that don't understand shock technology and all of the things that are going on, why have shocks become so important for sprint cars, for late models, for literally anything racing on dirt?
Basically, they control your. The main reason for shock is to control spring oscillations. Our spring packages have changed so much that we have to do creative things with shocks to control those oscillations against a cushion or any holes. Another thing is holding your aero platform. So there's things you have to do with shocks that is bad for grip to hold your aero platform where it needs to be. So then you have to figure out in sometimes very creative ways how to get that mechanical grip back. So I think that's the advancements of the shocks that we've seen in the last 5 years. So luckily, my relationship and collaboration with Bilstein, they allow me resources to do whatever we need to do.
Are, are
R&D.
there are there baseline situations that you're trying to use shocks for? Or, is there a bad shock package versus a good shock package? And like, how do you make the leap? Is it just straight trial and error, or is it very much scientific about, we're trying to get to X graph, whatever, on your shock dyno? Like, tell me, walk me through the process, at least in, in layman's terms, the best you can about that kind of transition, or how you make those learnings.
I mean, with my experience reading some data acquisition, if you have data, it's pretty black and white if your shock package is good or not, if you know how to read it. So we apply that to all Bilstein shocks. Our standard Longhorn set is very good and matched for the car and matched for all our spring packages. Um, yeah, so it's shocks are very black and white in my opinion. But obviously, you measure problems and you have to be very creative on assigning solutions for those problems. Then you have to measure the result of your solution. So
I guess that's an interesting point too you made there about matching the shocks to the car itself. Is that something that everyone is trying to do, matching a shock package to a specific chassis type, or is there a shock package that's going to work on a Longhorn that could work on any late model chassis?
I mean, they should be very close from car to car, but cars have different stiffnesses and different torsional stiffnesses and different setups. So, like for example, the stiffer the spring gets, the more control you need in the shock, and vice versa. So everything is tweaked and refined for the car packages, which is great. It gives all the chassis builders an additional item to sell that's kind of theirs and can give their customers uh, better solutions to grip and control.
I just have a couple more questions. I want to ask about the variances in like chassis that come off of a line, and you hear all the time, it happened a lot in NASCAR, is a driver has a specific chassis they like, they maybe have a chassis they don't like. Is there any sort of engineering way to explain why that happens when cars are technically supposed to be built as close as possible, but why does that happen? Like, do you have an explanation for why drivers have a point where they like a certain car versus another one?
Well, I mean, it's all in your manufacturing process and your welding procedures. All weldments distort when they're welded, so that causes small changes on all the cars. So, like a suspension point could be tweaked a quarter inch this way or a quarter inch that way. So drivers develop their notebook around some of these cars that are different from what they think they are. So when when the consumer gets the car that's maybe corrected the jig, so huge resources have been thrown into Longhorn chassis to make sure we get a consistent product, and we measure a lot of stuff now to make sure that all of our cars are consistent. And I feel like Longhorn chassis is just in a really good place right now.
I saw Steve Harpen. There was a Hunt the Front video this week where the guys came up to the shop, and Steve talked about the kind of the deadlines and things right now that they are placing on teams getting chassis and trying to like hit certain delivery dates and things like that. And I've heard stories of Longhorn kind of running almost nonstop, to kind of fill, all of the orders and things. Like, do you see that slowing down? Do is Longhorn a big enough building, and does it have enough like facilities to be able to keep up with all of this demand? Like, how is the manufacturing process going here lately, especially when it seems like so many teams are wanting those chassis from you guys?
Yeah, so one of the first things that Steve did was get a consistent throughput of chassis. Then he scattered problems. He has these gigantic spreadsheets to the day of when cars are going to be produced. And as long as you have a consistent throughput of the chassis manufacturing, you can plan accordingly. I think that's what's happening now. And Longhorn is set up as two buildings that are facing each other. And the process and the infrastructure has been developed around the demand. Um, and like I said, I think that's the element that Steve has brought to Longhorn to improve the product and the customer service side.
I'm sure you're going to East Bay at some point. I don't know if that's happening tomorrow or whatever for the practice day, but since that is coming up next on the Lucas schedule and the teams have so many nights there, what is kind of the challenge of racing at East Bay? I know that it seems every year like guys kind of like certain guys struggle there, certain guys do really well there, but from where you sit, what are the challenges of racing at that place?
Well, so it's 6 nights in the same place, and other than Volusia, as far as Lucas, that's the most nights the series are at a racetrack, and all the tracks in Florida are way different and very challenging. I think you're going to see the tire roll is going to change racing a little bit there. What we saw at Alltech was we we thought you could run tens the whole night on the corners, and I don't think there's any way possible that you're going to be able to run them in the future. So having the M20s is definitely going to change things at East Bay. Like the 10 steer, the 20s are probably going to be similar to the 1300s, where as it slows down, you're not going to be able to steer it. So then you have to do things to the car to free it up that kills your traction down the straightaway. So that is definitely why East Bay is very challenging, and it's not consistent. There's places where it's off cambered, it's very round. As the traction deteriorates, you can't get it in the corner fast enough during features to activate your suspension. So it makes it very challenging for the teams.
Last question before I let you go. I want to know how much we can take away as race fans for the rest of the season from what we've seen kind of through this first month or 2 months of the season, kind of between Vado and Georgia and Florida. Is this a trend? Like, can we take away that, the things that we've seen so far are going to continue, or are these kind of separate situations and we kind of have to wait to see till we get into some more of the Midwest races and some of the kind of more, core places on the late model schedule before we can really get an idea about how the season's going to go?
Yeah, I think you're going to see. I think you're going to see a great racing season. I think with the streaming wars last year, I think the competition has made every series a lot better. I mean, I see things and witness things that needed to happen with the series, and I think they've improved their product greatly. And with that comes the improved racing. Everybody worked together on the tire deal, which I think is going to be great for racing. So I think you're going to see an amazing season.
Awesome. Well, Kevin Rumley, I certainly appreciate the time today. I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot of stuff to do. So thanks for cutting some time out of your day to have a little chat with me.
Yeah, thank you.